Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this webinar. This is our grant launch for the Walton Family Foundation Project Grant. Per usual, the topics will be kind of a grant overview. We're going to talk a little bit about project deliverables and staffing, then get into a tiny little bit on monitoring and reporting and some expense and finance notes at the end. We hope there will be questions. We'll try to stop partway through each goal so you can ask questions, and then also at the end. On that note, this is the overview of the 2026 transition grant. It is $1.3 million and $300. The grant period started back March 1, 2026 to February 28, 2027, so 12 months. We have two formal written reports. The first report is January 15 interim, which should be most of all of the updates that we're going to do. And then we do have a final report just a couple of months later to close it out. On that, I'm going to kind of dive us in, but before I do, this is just kind of a reminder. You've probably seen this slide before, but the way Walton talks about their terminology is that the outputs are direct results of the activities we do. So products, goods, services that we create or deliver during the course of this grant. Compare that to the outcomes, which is impacts or changes that we intend to achieve through these outputs. So it could be changes in policy, behavior, activity, state of an ecosystem, or an ecosystem component. This is out of our direct control. So there's always that chance we might not hit that outcome, but I'm sure we'll do our best. With that said, as mentioned, they depend on many factors. So talked about that, and I'm now going to kind of mention one more thing before I hand off to Ian. And that is, if you worked on the outputs and outcomes for this grant, the way that we worked on it internally involved a 3 numbering system. So 1.1, 1.1.1, etc. Walton doesn't seem to like this, and they use a 2 numbering system. So I really want to be clear that our numbering system from the award letter will have new numbers. So it'll be output 1.1, outcome 1.2, output 1.3, or whatever, etc. It's not a 3 numbering system anymore. So make sure that you internalize that and use their numbering system moving forward. On that note, I'm now going to hand off to Ian to start diving us into goal 1. Ian, off to you.
Thanks, Chris. And Chris, the other Chris picked up a good point. We used this is the project grant launch webinar, not the transition grant webinar. So we've missed that one on the first slide, Chris, just for the
Did I
recording.
really?
So me and Chris, we used the template for the transition grant. So we had to make a few
Oops.
last minute corrections, and we obviously missed
Yep.
one. So just for the recording, this is the project grant launch webinar for everybody who was wondering whether they should be here on the call. So thanks for picking that up.
Thanks, Chris.
Sort of
Sorry about that.
So before we jump into this, so firstly, just to remind everybody, I mean, just a big thank you to everybody on the call who was involved in developing this grant, which was most people on the call had some sort of input or had some comments on this. So this was a very heavy lift. There was a lot of back and forth with Walton on this grant, and particularly big thanks to Pedro and his team, because it felt like they had more back and forths with Renu and the team on developing the outputs and outcomes. But yeah, so we'll move on with this. So the grant, as Chris said, is stretched on for 12 months. We don't know what happens after that 12 months. Walton are going through a transitional period for their strategy. Hopefully there will be some access to future funding from Walton, but at the moment we don't know what that looks like. So this grant, unlike previous grants, is only for 12 months. We have the transition grant, which is running simultaneously to this, which has other outputs and outcomes associated with it. But this one is a 12-month grant that finishes at the end of February next year. It contains 4 main goals, and we'll go through each one of them now on the webinar. So Megan's going to take care of goal 3 because that's specifically related to the Mexican work, and Pedro who I hope is on the call because I can't see everybody. Pedro or Teddy will take care of the goal 4 piece. So talking about goal 1, we have had some discussions with some of the industry leadership team on this grant throughout the development of this grant, and also you'll all remember, for those of you who were on the markets SR Matrix team call a few weeks ago, we did discuss this grant, and you were provided with a link, which again is linked in this webinar. But as Chris said, please note that the outputs and outcome numbering has changed since we got the award letter from them. But everything included, all the activities are the same. They haven't changed any of our language. They've just changed the numbering on the outputs and outcomes. And it's worth noting for goal 1 and 2, there are a lot of staff involved in this. So goal 1 is specifically focused around SFP's data tools resources, collaboration with different stakeholders, and alignment for increased accountability. Now, when we talk about accountability, that's one of Walton's new strategy focuses, is more accountability for the seafood industry. Now, accountability can come in 2 forms. It can come in the form of a stick and a carrot. Walton have always sort of more funded the promotion of good stuff for accountability, whereas we do see them transferring a little bit to the sort of stick effects, those sort of beating people a bit more for accountability in the seafood sector. So if we can go to the next slide, Chris. So let me just close my thumbnails. So deliverables. So Chris has already talked about what difference between outputs and outcomes. So the first output in goal 1, we are going to look at reviewing and mapping various data sets, tools, resources, and the current relationships that we have with different stakeholders. The goal of this is to try and understand who we're working with and provide a targeted list of who we might want to target to work with in the future. All of our deliverables will be reported to Walton at the end of the grant. But as Chris said, there is an interim. There is also an interim report that we have to give close to the end of the grant. And most of the stuff we're doing is just providing Walton with summaries and drafts of what we've been doing. So that first output is to try and promote our work, try and get more people using our tools and resources. And the first outcome associated with that is that there are more businesses and key stakeholders, including people like financial institutions, who have increased their use of SFP tools and resources to inform decision making related to seafood sourcing and risk management. And the target that we've set with Walton here is at least 6 new organisations are actively paying for SFP assets. Now that hopefully is quite a realistic target that we can push towards. In fact, I would say hopefully it's a very conservative target moving forward, but Walton seemed quite happy with that. Next slide, Chris. So the next outcome that we want to see from the output is alignment on data and messaging across the seafood sector, increases through strengthened and new collaborations, resulting in more consistent and robust data sharing to support corporate responsibility and accountability, with the hope that we can get at least 6 new updated or new formalised relationships established through MOUs or data sharing agreements. Again, hopefully this is quite a conservative measure. We already have signed 1 MOU since we started this grant, and that was with Whole Chain. Thanks to Jen and the team working hard on that. And that was announced in Boston. And that should meet one of those targets. And Mercedes is working really closely, as are others on this call, with different MOUs with new organisations. And we are also looking to update MOUs with existing organisations such as Fishery Progress and also ASC. So hopefully, again, that will be, we should be able to achieve that, no problem. The next outcome will be around fishery IDs. Again, we're already doing a lot of work. We've been having conversations with people around our fishery IDs, but the outcome here is fishery IDs are adopted and integrated by at least 5 new key seafood sector stakeholders as a common identifier to support traceability, transparency, and data interoperability across systems. Additionally, the Global Dialogue of Seafood Traceability agrees to table a discussion with members on the process of integration of the fishery IDs into the GDST standard. And again, you look at that and say, oh God, this is quite big, but this is work that is already happening. We are already talking to various stakeholders around use of our fishery IDs. And Mercedes has already started conversations with GDST around how we can get ourselves tabled. The reason that this is just tabling ourselves for a discussion with members on the process of integration of the fishery IDs into the standard is because GDST have drastically changed the way they work over the last couple of years, and they now only hold, I think it's two, Mercedes can correct me if I'm wrong, I think they only hold 2 meetings, major meetings, member meetings a year, and you kind of have to go through one process to be even considered to be put on the next meeting for consideration. So that basically takes us almost over a 12-month period. But Mercedes is working closely with GDST on that. Next slide, Chris. Next, we move on to a new output. So this output, Walton were very keen for SFP to be seen a lot more out in the industry as somebody who supports corporates and suppliers and retailers on corporate responsibility. And they also wanted us to be seen externally by various people, various organisations, as an organisation that does support all this work. So this is more focused around comms and things. So the output here is we will produce and disseminate 6 case studies and communication materials that demonstrate our role in supporting corporate responsibility and accountability through our data, tools, and our partnerships. So the vision we had here is even some of the partner spotlights that we have on the website could be counted as this, of how we're working with our different partners and helping them to support corporate responsibility and accountability within their businesses. And the outcomes here is Walter would like to see at least 3 external stakeholders publicly recognise SFP as a trusted organisation whose data, tools, resources and partnerships both support and apply pressure across the seafood supply chain to help businesses meet corporate responsibility goals. Now, our understanding from talking to Walton of what this means is exactly, we'll reference the whole chain MOU in Boston again. Bill and Amy did a very good job of making sure there was a good press release for that, and Bill did some good outreach to some of the big news outlets, and that was picked up by the seafood press. So that would be able to be used as one of these examples. So again, they've asked for 3 across a 12-month period. Hopefully we've already got 1. So we were publicly recognised at that point. This relationship with Whole Chain should strengthen using our tools, data, resources, as well as whole chains to support businesses to meet corporate responsibility goals and traceability targets. So I'm going to stop there because I think the next slide, Chris, is moving on to goal. Well, we've got people in here, so let's go through this slide and then we can stop for questions. So this is just a recap of what we've just talked about. So these sort of sub goals, outcomes. So reviewing and mapping existing data sets, assets and tools, key stakeholders increasing their use, alignment of data messaging with new MOUs, fishery IDs, and those case studies, and the external recognition we talked about. So you can see on the right-hand side, we've got the staff involved. As I said, there are a lot of people involved in this goal 1, so we didn't want to list everybody's names here. So we have listed departments here. So that review of mapping and existing data sources will basically incorporate all of the industry leadership team. So we need to understand and map who's using fish source information, who's using ODP, who's using our FIP evaluation ratings, Markets can support with all this. Advisory services can support, and as well, the SR leads can support on these pieces. Businesses and key stakeholders increasing the use of our data and paying for assets. That's mainly focused around markets and advisory services. I've got a comment on the next slide, though, that it is a responsibility of everybody at SFP at the moment to just flag if you see opportunities with businesses elsewhere. So that is a requirement for everybody. If you see something that could be a business opportunity for SFP, make sure you're either running with it or flagging it to somebody to take that on. Alignment of data meshing increases with at least 6 new updated relationships. Again, I think that will fall mostly on the markets and advisory services team, but I do know that Kerry is talking to Community Catch, and I'm sure, Dave, you'll be talking to others who may want to sign MOUs and things with us. So again, although we've got a small subset of departments in here, if you see opportunities, it would be good for you to flag those. And Jin's working on things with Fishery Progress, and I expect to see an updated MOU over the next 12 months with them as well. Fishery ID work, predominantly driven by fish source markets, advisory services, and any opportunities that we see in supply chain roundtables for use of fishery IDs would be great. Case studies, so that would be more reliant on comms, but obviously the only official comms person we've got on this call, I think, is Amy, but obviously Amy has got the support of anybody else that she needs to support on those case studies. And then at least 3 external, so I'm moving my thumbnail again. At least 3 external stakeholders publicly recognise SFP as a trusted source. Again, I would expect that to come through press releases. So we've highlighted comms there as and I am the lead for all of this. So questions you've got, then you can come to me on these things if you haven't got questions now. But I will stop there for a minute and see if people have burning questions that they want to talk about on this webinar. And I can't see anybody really if people are putting hands up. So just maybe, Chris, you can manage that, or just shout out and start a conversation if you want to ask questions.
Can do. PV?
Hey, Ian.
Hey, Pedro.
Hey, just a quick question. So actually two. So on the case studies, is this something that could be related also to the case studies that we are developing for the collaborative management? I'm not sure, because that relates to industry involvement and so on and so on. I
Yeah,
guess.
it could be related, Pedro, but we would have to demonstrate that that was something that SFP has been directly involved in, which might not be the case for that. And also we have to recognise Walton were very clear that there has to be a very distinct separation between what is included in this grant and what is included in the transition grant.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So that would be
Okay,
more
so
in line with the transition.
yeah.
Okay. So output 1.6, again, is this only related to stakeholders recognizing SFP and its work and tools and data? Are you talking only about industry, or that could kind of academia also be put into
Yeah,
here? Because we've got
I
a
mean,
couple of partnerships with academia, and recently we submitted a paper with the Royal Swedish Academy. So I guess we could, if we ask them, I think we could get some sort of claim or recognition. We actually are having quotes from them now for the FIP research database public release. So again, it's just a question. I'm not sure if that's helpful or not.
no, absolutely, Pedro, and that's that they could definitely be, that sort of stuff could definitely be used as this. It's just recognizing our data tools, resources, the FIP database is a resource of SFPs, so absolutely, if people recognize that publicly, then we need to keep records of that. I'm hoping, we only have to report 3, but theoretically, we could go back to Walton with 10 of these at the end of the grant if we wanted to. And Pedro, this is the next slide there is a little call out for you in there, Pedro, because you may be sat there thinking, why am I here? Because I don't really fit into this. You're called out simply for exactly this sort of stuff, Pedro.
Okay. Okay.
You
Good.
know, is that's why we've written you into this grant. We will want to utilize you in different aspects of this grant, in case you
Okay.
were wondering.
Yep. Thanks, Ian.
Any other questions? Okay, let's move on, Chris. So this is again just a sort of summary slide. So you'll see from what we have in the info for goal one, this is very closely linked to our existing work streams, and that was done by design. We didn't want to bring in loads of new work streams when I know that everybody is so flat out and over capacity as it is. So this all of this work should be supporting what we're already doing. Okay, what we've been directed to do by Jim, you know, over the next sort of 12 months or so. It is similar, but not the same as the transition work streams. The transition work streams are more around exploration of business models and financial targets, collaborative management pieces, whereas this is more around delivery and engaging with key sectors, stakeholders in the sector. There are a lot of staff involved in, especially in goal one, as you'll see as we go through the rest of the presentation. There's not as many staff involved in other areas, although Pedro has got a big component in his section. And if you have questions or you're unsure on what you should be reporting, then you can reach out to me directly. Again, as I said before, all staff should be on the lookout for opportunities to support all of these different outcome areas. And I shared that link with a lot of people on here, but it does list, there is a link listed here, which hopefully Chris will be able to share after after the webinar. I'll make sure it's available where we're housing this, which does list people's level of efforts in these different in this grant. And there is also some allocation for travel and website development and upgrades. Not a significant amount of money for website development and things, and that a lot of that will be utilised within fish source upgrade, which you'll see in goal 2, and also for ODP pieces. But there may be some stuff available, Amy, for the SFP website. There is a relatively decent travel budget associated to this component. So hopefully that's all clear. But again, I'm sure that Amy's probably got lots of questions around what that means. And PV, I've already called you out on this, so we can have separate one-on-one calls if you're unsure about things on this, and alignment calls moving forward. So we'll move on to goal 2 then, please, Chris. I say, so goal 2 is really focused around innovation, efficiency, and alignment to foster creation and greater uptake of data and public reporting to support accountability mechanisms. So what does that mean? So let's move into the first output and outcome. Chris, next slide. So Walton were very interested in the ocean disclosure platform. Now we've seen over the last 12 months, I mean, ocean disclosure has always been used by different stakeholders. And again, hopefully we can get some more information on who's using it through the mapping exercise up in goal 1. But what we really want to do is make sure that the ocean disclosure is as easy as possible for people to take part in moving forward. So we're going to look at how we can improve the user tracking functionality within the platform to allow people to disclose on here more easily. We're also seeing that different organizations, rightly or wrongly, are using ODP as a way to hold industry account, and that is healthy. It has generated some really good conversations with partners when they're being flagged by different organizations for sourcing Russian fish or particular gear types, those sort of things. It's really helping us drive conversations with partners. So the outcome here is that we would like to see participation in the ODP increasing among global seafood businesses. We want to see a minimum of 15 businesses on ODP this year, from a baseline of 9 businesses that actually reported in 2025. This, hopefully the outcome will be that the platform maintains a strong and leading resource for public disclosure and transparency of seafood sourcing. Now, just to put this into perspective, there have been, and again, these numbers won't be perfectly correct. We've had over 40 companies disclose on ODP over the years. Um, some of them come and go. However, some of the feedback we've had is it's quite a labor-intensive process for them to go through this. So hopefully changing the functionality of the system and making it easier for people to report will be able to increase the amount of people that are using ODP. So any questions on the ODP piece? Don't know.
Yep, thank you very much, Ian. Well, actually, I just want to confirm about one thing because we are discussing about ODP. We are now in the process of making the ODP more efficient to make it um, connected directly with metrics. So is this including that kind of automation that can make
Uh,
the work efficient to generate the reports in ODP website?
Absolutely, Dono. So
All
again,
right.
this goes back to what we were talking about. So none of this stuff that we've included here is 100% new work. This is all stuff
Yeah.
that we were working on, and we saw an opportunity to engage Walton to be able to support that work sort of moving forward. So you're absolutely right. I mean, that would be a dream is for people to be able to populate their ocean disclosure profile by clicking a button in metrics. That would be a dream come true, because then it would mean that there wasn't lots of back and forth, and Tanya having to spend hours and hours collating information into a profile. So hopefully this gives us the opportunity to be able to develop stuff like that.
All righty. Thank you very much.
Any other questions before we move on to the next part of goal 2? Nope. Okay, so next slide then, please. Oh, here we go. You've done it. The next output is looking at fish source. So the output here is to improve efficiency, coverage, and timeliness of fish source data, leading to a strengthening of other SFP tools and incentives for broader use by establishing collaborations with external data providers and begin transitioning its data architecture to a microservices approach that supports automated data feeds through APIs and AI-enabled processes. That is a mouthful, and I'm glad that we have a fish source data team that's going to be working on that, and not me. So the goal here is that fish source operates with a back-end systems capable of large-scale automated data exchanges, supported by AI-enabled data collection and active data sharing partnerships with at least 2 data providers or sources that are actively providing regular automated data feeds. I can answer questions on this, but I will probably defer them to other people. So if people have got questions on that, and Susanna will be taking care of this, obviously, with Ananta and others. So next slide then, Chris. So looking at these again, just looking at who would be involved in this work. So platform enhancements for ODP would directly include, obviously, the ODP team, so Tanya, and advisory services, increasing participation in ODP. That falls squarely on markets, advisory services, ODP, and potentially SRs if we want to see if SRs want to start, and even if you don't want, like we have with the Squid SR, like an overall ODP, then obviously just pitching ODP to companies within supply chain roundtables would be helpful. Going on to 2.3, so improving efficiency, coverage, and timeliness of fish source data, that is directly on fish source to complete that piece of work, as is 2.4. So if there's no questions, we'll move on. Taken up quite a lot of time, and I'll pass over to Megan.
Okay, thanks, Ian. So goal 3 is all about the Mexican Snapper Grouper Supply Chain Roundtable. Basically, the direction we're heading with this SR now is actually putting it a little more in the backseat role with respect to the improvement work going on in Mexico that Walton is also funding, because we have a very limited capability in this SR. It's a small SR, and as we start to charge money for it, I think it's going to get smaller and smaller. And the US has limited leverage over some of these products coming out of Mexico. There are some grouper species that a lot of the product comes to the US, same with snapper, but then there is also a lot that stays in Mexico. So we've really come to recognize over the years that the capabilities and the leverage this SR has are very limited. A lot of this product also goes into food service, like restaurants, and that is not a sector in the US that's very concerned with sustainability. So we really don't have any major buyer leverage that can help move this work along. So we really tried to figure out this go round how SFP can work with the importers in the US who are interested in sustainability, how we can work with them to support what's going on in Mexico, what Walton is funding in Mexico. So next slide, Chris. So we have three outcomes. We did not do any outputs for this SR work, just these three outcomes, and we tried to keep it pretty high level. I do have a really strong and regular communication relationship with Dailene, who's the Mexico program officer. So she and I really got on the same page about what we want to see this SR do this year, and then we really simplified it greatly to go into these three outcomes. So the first outcome is that 3 of the US importers, who are SR participants, will deliver at least one message each, whether it's written or a verbal message, where they're advocating for snapper or grouper management, good management or traceability in Mexico. And that message can either go to a Mexican government official or to a seafood stakeholder in their supply chain, basically their vendors who are participating in FIPS. So this is really just about getting the SR to take action to support the sustainability improvements in Mexico. Outcome 3.2 is that the SR participants will continue to comply with the sustainable sourcing policy that I worked with them to approve and put in place last year. They went through a full year of this sourcing policy where they're each required to have at least one FIP participant in their supply chain, and they are also required to not purchase any products below of this agreed voluntary minimum size limit for red grouper, black grouper, red snapper, lane snapper, and yellowtail snapper. So those are the 5 key grouper and snapper species that come to the US. The only one of them, red grouper, has an actual legal minimum size limit in Mexico. The rest do not. And so one of the sustainability issues is about harvest of juvenile fish. And if you're harvesting too many juvenile fish, it's pretty hard to have a sustainable population long term. So the US importers agreed to these voluntary size limits for their supply chains. And so now they're not bringing in any whole fish or fillets that correspond to the basically the average size at maturity for those 5 species. So we went through one full year of implementation of the sourcing policy and did a verification of it where the SR participants disclose info to SFP about their sourcing, just to make sure that their actions, their purchasing actions, are truly supporting sustainability in Mexico. So we're going to continue implementing and verifying compliance with that sustainable port sourcing policy in the next year. And then the third outcome is about us starting to get money from this SR. I think this is the last SR that does not give us any financial support for the work, in part because Mexico or the Walton Foundation has had a really strong giving and intentions to keep giving in this sector. So I hope they continue to do that. But we also recognize, and Walton wants the industry to acknowledge that they need to be putting forth some money as well. So what I told Walton I would do, and what I've told the SR now at this point, is that we are going to try to get $15,000 from the US importers. Right now, there's only 7 in the SR. So that's about 2,000 to 2,500 each for the year, which is fairly middle ground with respect to what a lot of our SR participants have paid in other SRs. And so we're going to ask them to give us that funding for the year 2026. Half of it would go to SFP to help pay for our secretariat services, recognizing that the rest of the work we're doing is currently being funded by the Walton Foundation. And then the other half of it, so 7,500, would get put into a pool of money where we will then solicit proposals from improvement projects on the ground in Mexico, and we will help the SR participants decide what project they want to support. And so it's a way to help those FIPS achieve some of the actions and activities they need to undertake without the FIP participants having to pay for it. So it's getting the US importers to contribute money to advance the FIP work. So those are the three main areas we're going to work on in this next year. It's all very much in line with what we've been doing in the past, but with a few small changes. Chris, next slide. So looking at it from a sub-goal perspective, like Ian did, kind of simplifying it. For the first goal there, getting the importers to deliver at least one message advocating for improvements. I'm going to start having quarterly check-in calls with the Mexican NGOs and FIP leads just to make sure that I'm very up to speed on what they are doing and what their needs are in Mexico. And then I'll have quarterly SR meetings to share that information with the SR participants. And we also did put money in there in the budget for fish source profiles for the 5 key species. And so the people who would be involved in this deliverable are me, and then the fish source team, which in the past for Mexican snapper and grouper has been Miguel Romano and Patricia. For 3.2, the sustainable sourcing policy compliance verification, we did manual reporting and verification this year. This past year. In this upcoming year, I want to look at the feasibility of doing a metrics dashboard for the SR and seeing if having them report in through metrics is any easier. It probably won't be easier, but it might provide better, higher quality and higher resolution information. So I'm not sure if how well they're going to like doing that, but maybe if they see the information that can come out of it, they'll agree to keep doing it in the future. So we did decide to go ahead and put this in while Walton's still footing the bill. And so for this deliverable, it will be me and somebody from advisory services who will help set up that metrics dashboard. And then sub goal 3.3, the SR funding. I talked about that, about how that will work, and that will just pretty much be me working on that with the SR. And I think that was it for my slides. Are there any questions about the Mexico work? Okay.
I'm going to hand off to goal 4. Pedro, do you happen to be on the call right now? Would you be able to take on goal 4 for us?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Even though it says there goal 3, it should be goal 4, right?
Oh man, that's my fault. I'm sorry.
Don't worry. The goal is to strengthen the industry leadership in the fisheries governance through improved science and sustainability financing in Peru. As you know, Walton is only funding work in Peru, and in this case, we had to choose which of the fisheries we were working there offer us better opportunities, and we decided to move on with Mahi Mahi. So please, next slide. And yeah, as Ian pointed at the beginning of the presentation, it was hard and tough, I will say, process with Renault and her assistants in Peru. But yeah, it's part of the reality and the space we work with, because a lot of other NGOs, domestic NGOs in Peru, were also competing for the same bucket of money. So it's totally understandable. But anyway, so the first output of this goal is develop a lessons learned technical report documenting progress on regional multi-stakeholder management of Mahi Mahi, with focus on intergovernmental collaboration for improving Mahi stocks and its impact on sustainability initiatives. The idea behind this is to evidence how the work SFP has been doing through the support of Coremaji at regional level has impact all the different fisheries that form the EPO Mahi fisheries landscape, right? So fisheries in Peru, Ecuador, Costa Rica, all the different countries have benefited from the work that we have been doing through Coremaji, or Coremaji has been doing with our support, I should say, right? So the idea here is to put black over white for everyone to understand that FIPS have moved or stay still are with a good progress rating because of the work that Koremachi has been doing at regional level, right? Either through science and management proposals or also through initiatives to mitigate bad catch and other stuff. Yeah, the outcome for 4.2 is and this first section, yeah, okay, let me go back and explain the rationale of the proposal here. This first section is aimed to maintain momentum, right? After what we have achieved through the previous focus grant, we felt that we need to keep momentum in order to maintain those opportunities open, right? So this first part is to keep that momentum. So outcome 4.1, 4.2 is strengthened. Koremachi is strengthened to formally develop at least one MAGI management recommendation jointly developed by multiple Koremachi member countries and supported by the Global MAGI SR for consideration with AATTC, within AATTC processes through the corresponding national delegations. This is the same work we have been doing in the previous years, where Koremachi is taking part in the AATTC discussions and also suggesting and presenting management measures and proposals. Last time Koremachi was able of getting the approval of the development or the setting of the Koremachi MAGI working group, specific to deal with the management of the MAGI under the ITTC. So this year the idea is for Koremachi, which is formed by Costa Rica members, Ecuadorian members, Peruvian members, and what is this Ecuador, Peruvian, and Costa Rican members to present a proposal. The first Dorado MAGI working group happened already in March, so right after the beginning of this grant. And right now, the team is working with Koremachi on preparing that proposal that will be shared with the ITTC for the next ITTC meeting to be discussed within the next ITTC meeting. Right, so this is already in process and in good shape. The outcome 4.3 is aimed to keep the scientific work and the collaboration that has been developed at binational level between Ecuador and Peru, between both national scientific institutions to advance the science of the MAGI. To better understand the stock structure, if there is one population, different populations interconnected, how they move in the Eastern Pacific Ocean, if there are differences from the genetics point of view, and also to understand what is the situation and of the stock, right? The health of the stock. So for this year, what we have suggested is that TPAP and Korema and NIMARPE, both national scientific institutions, will collaborate to complete and update the stock assessment of MAGI. But instead of us bringing an expert to develop the stock assessment with their information, now that they have gained capacities to perform this assessment on their own, they will be performing the assessment on their own, and we will bring external capacity to improve and assure that the quality of the stock assessment is good enough and meets the expectations, right? So we will bring Ruben, who is our the scientist that help us in that space, to help EPAP and IMARPE to run the stock assessment and ensure that the quality of that product is good and ready for the ITTC. Yeah, next slide. Okay, now we move on the second part of the goal 4, which is trying to get or advance in a model which is industry funded for the governance of the Mahi-Mahi fishery in the Eastern Pacific Ocean, right? So for that, there is the output 4.4, which is SFP in collaboration with WWF. Will run a target engagement campaign with key importers, distributors, and retailer brands to build, buy in, and mobilize initial funding for a co-design industry-led financing mechanism as the most viable pathway to strengthen long-term EPO Mahi governance. So in the first part of our work, we are going to be evidencing that the work done at EPO level under Coremaji is key to ensure that all different FIPs at national level can reach MSC certification or whatever level of performance and improve their level of performance. And here, what we are gonna, and in the first section also, we are gonna generate the evidences for that, right? So here, what we are gonna be trying to do is to convince the industry that co-designing financing mechanism with the different stakeholders in order to support the long-term governance of the fishery is the best way of ensuring and making these fisheries viable in the long run. They should understand that most of the advances have been done through the support of foundation, and this is why we have that report at the beginning in outcome 4.1, right? And that will evidence that. So here the idea is that that the industry realized that what their contributions have not been really delivering improvements, have been sustaining FIPS. So we want them to understand that building a mechanism that ensures the long-term governance of the fishery is the only way to sustain performance. So the output 4.5 is through joint SFP WWF engagement. At least 10 supply chain companies across multiple levels formally commit to participate in the co-design and of the industry-led finance mechanism, and at least 50,000 USD in financial or in-kind contributions is documented and mobilized during the grant period to fund this co-design process. And yeah, that's here what we are going to be doing is to okay, now the stuff that is going to be involved in this in the different outcomes and outputs, Teddy and Cassandra will be leading that. I mean, Teddy will be leading the development of the technical report, but Cassandra will be using his expert eye to provide feedback because he's really good at doing that. So while Teddy is also going to be leading 4.2 and 4.3 because he holds the relations with Coremaji and with IPIAP and Marken, right? While myself and Keddy will be supporting him in the engagement of industry and getting their contributions. So for the development of this co-financing mechanism, this funding mechanism for the governance of the fishery. Yeah, and I think that's it, right?
That's it. I think it's off to questions for Peru before we get on to some admin. I'm not seeing any questions and I'm cognizant of the time, so I'm going to try and run through the admin details quickly, and then we'll open it back up if there's any questions around the overall grant. So these slides you'll have seen before. They're just some reminders to everybody on this call. So, please make sure that you write progress in the context of the grant outputs and outcomes, include context and links to evidence. This helps me and the M&E team a lot to kind of cross-reference things and utilize it. Oh, Chris.
Yeah,
Would you like to
I
jump
think
in?
unfortunately that is really like another slide that you have taken over from the transition grant, but it will be different for the project grants because we
Oh,
have
is
not
it?
only
Okay.
like two grant outputs and we haven't set up actually like the reporting system for that grant yet, right? A mistake, but we have a bit of time for that as well. The
Yeah,
most
this is kind
important
of
thing was that VNet is
yeah, go on.
set up.
Yeah, understood. This is actually not from the transition grant. That was a completely different slide, but this is kind of an overarching slide we've been using. So I'm happy to defer to you on the M&E slide as makes sense. But in lieu of time, is there anything else you'd like to mention on M&E and reporting before I move on?
No, I think like we will reach out basically like to everyone involved in progress reporting later on once we have agreed with Ian and the other report leads to set up in Terra.
Got it. Okay, well, we'll kind of put a pin in this and come back to it as makes sense. Some usual expense and finance notes that you should have all seen this before. Mention about service claims. Make sure your charging plan's realistic. Try to follow your charging plan to the best of your abilities, so that way we don't have to over or underspend or reclassing the grant. That saves our finance team some additional time. And if something changes in the project or you don't think a deliverable is being met, please reach out to Ian, Megan, Pedro, and or myself as makes sense. So that way we can kind of work with both you and Walton to make sure that everything is moving forward to the best of our abilities. For ShareSpace, these are the ticket numbers that we are going to be using for the project grant. Feel free to write them down, but also pop into ShareSpace and just keyword search to find them. And on that note, I know we only have a minute or two left, but I want to give everyone a chance to add one additional question or two before we wrap everything up. And or Ian, if there's anything else you would like to add.
No, nothing else to add, Chris. Just thanks and this has been a rush. We had to rush this through. Chris took a lot of care, a lot of this while I was on leave for the last couple of weeks. So yeah, forgive us for any small little errors in the thing, but I think everybody gets the drift of the grant. And again, we will come back to you with reporting criteria once I manage to catch up with Chris a little bit more. But I'm assuming there's no more questions unless people do have them. And if not, we'll thank you everybody for taking the time to join, and we'll make sure that those who couldn't join, because hopefully they're off on other busy meetings or on leave, we can make sure that they see this webinar too.
Yep. So this webinar is being recorded. What I'm going to do is copy around the PowerPoint and share it around in an email along with the recording link. And I will also go into ShareSpace tickets as well as appropriate. So we will be disseminating this information for anyone that could not make it. So I think on that note, we really appreciate everybody taking the time to attend this webinar. And thank you again for Ian, Megan, Pedro being my co-hosts. And Christian, thank you again for all your comments and your keen eyes. I appreciate it. On that note, thanks everyone and have a great rest of your day, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you.